I've got a suggestion, which is that, in a sense, somebody else, one of us, or several of us, but with me not having a special role, have a special responsibility for the accessibility hour and the things coming out of the accessibility hour. That would suit me well, because it will allow me to focus on other things, that are nearby. And it would help sort of share the responsibility. And I don't want this organization or whatever we're setting up to be a mirror of who I am. Are you going, Kelly?
Sorry, what was that? I had to take a bio break.
Okay. So I'm very happy for anybody to sort of to pass this particular thing up to somebody else. I'm also aware that I've made a lot of contacts with people in adjacent areas who are concerned with accessibility. And before we go too far, we need to sort of coordinate with them and make sure we're not upsetting them and contribute to their projects as a preference to creating our own. I think it's really important that we sort of do our homework and try and find another place to contribute this. Anything we produce, we try and find another place to contribute it to.
Jonathan? I would say let's just start something small, as you were sort of saying, either organization or not. Let's start up small, collect some of what we've collected sort of ad hoc, which is in lots of loose emails, put it someplace, and then we'll see if we can find a better place to host it, or we want to really more formalize that we're becoming a warehouse of collected information, invite other people to to contribute to our warehouse of links and advice and pointers. I don't think we're ever going to try to become an accessibility training site. There's plenty of other places that people can learn everything they really need if they want to go learn it. But anybody who needs a little bit of basics and a little bit of pointers, someone who is there, it's really not easy to get started. There's endless sources of information, and a lot of it's confusing, and very little of it is really well organized for the niche we're talking about, which is STEM and engineering and science users. We're sort of underserved and mostly overloaded, I guess, also on a personal method basis. So start small and grow, and then we'll see where it goes.
I like the idea of starting small. Why doesn't everybody have an opportunity to suggest something that they'd like to see done in the next month or two? Possibly even the next week.
But once we have a site, we can put it into the issue tracker or the project board, and we're going. It's asynchronous.
So the first thing is set up an issue tracker and a project board, or something like that. That's easy, as long as naming things is difficult, so we need a working title perhaps. So we've got that. I think it would be good. I think there's been a lot of useful stuff in this conversation. For example, the concept of self-voicing that I was unaware of. So going through the transcript of this video and picking out some of the nuggets, I think that would be a good thing to do.
I think I second the idea, or third, or I lost track of how many, but start small and start accumulating the pieces, because that'll that'll help even define what this energy is, I think. And so if there is another logical place, maybe someone would recognize it. But if not, I think a lot of times, because I've worked with faculty and I'm an accessibility person and more technical, but like I've been working with a lot of STEM faculty lately, and they speak a totally different language. And I often have to try to listen to their concepts and try to understand where they're coming from, because I'm not well versed in the tech world, like LaTeX and text code. But trying to understand their needs and then support their rendering of accessible content electronically is what the piece I'm trying to add here at Indiana University. But I know they recognize the world totally differently and I think they need their own space to see all these pieces together, because communication about especially which text and LaTeX tools can produce accessible content, or which ones maybe to be wary of, or best practices using this tool, or chain these tools together. I think that's all important information to put together in a space that, at least when I search for that, I don't find it, and somewhat, struggle to accumulate that. So I think there is value here. And in my knowledge, I don't know that it exists somewhere else, but I will humbly say that maybe my search skills aren't so great, but because I'm not connected to this community, I'm just trying to support some individuals who are in it, but don't understand accessibility enough. And that was my piece in the slice of the pie. So.
I'd say that, Brian, what you're saying is almost what we need is to aggregate a lot of bits of information that are scattered and hard to find. And that some experts have some idea of some of them. And apparently very few people have a lot of them easily accessible in the other sense. And what we want to do is we want to at least start aggregating it in a way that it's easier for people to discover what other people have found or suggested as a starting point. And I'm all for that. I'm willing to put time in also to trying to contribute some of the bits and pieces I have in my mailboxes and various note files.
I think one of the things we want is a place where people can ask questions, and also where they can read answers that are already being given. To a certain extent, Stack Overflow does that sort of thing, but we're not nearly large enough or coherent enough for that. But it certainly provides a place where people can ask questions and read other people's questions. So I'd like to go back to what I was saying about Google. We've had this sort of these conversations earlier. And if we can sort of extract value out of those conversations and turn them into, I'll use the word web pages, but actually an issue on an issue tracker is a web page. And they're no different. A web page is just a particular, is a general concept. An issue on an issue tracker is a special concept. So I think an issue tracker and a place where people can ask questions of a sort of some sort of nature. And I'll stop.
Jonathan, is it your sense that there's already questions being asked on Stack Overflow that just don't have good answers to them? Or that people don't have a space to actually ask the question?
Okay, on Stack Overflow, they will set up a special stack for you if you can show you've got a community, and that's how tech.stack exchange got started. So I don't think we're sort of large enough or coherent enough to manage something on Stack Overflow at this time. But I think the model of Stack Overflow, which is if you ask a question, you'll get an answer.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we start our own Stack Overflow. I was just suggesting that maybe we encourage each other to try to answer questions that remain unanswered on Stack Overflow.
Oh, I don't think there's a forum specifically devoted to accessibility, you see, on Stack Overflow. And the other thing is, I don't know how accessibility is for the people who are, for example, visually impaired. We'd have to, we're sort of subject to a dietary constraint, which is because we're keen on accessibility, we tend to eschew things that are not accessible. So, I think we've got into a bit of a muddle here, Kelly. I mentioned Stack Overflow as an example where it's a place where people can ask questions and get answers. I think that's, in a sense, what we want to be, whether it's part of Stack Overflow, either a new part of Stack Overflow or an existing part of Stack Overflow, or it's already happening in the blind math list and the visually impaired programmers list. So they'll ask questions and I'll answer, and other people in that group will answer those questions. And I don't want to take away that place. I don't want them to say they have to move somewhere else. So the answer to some questions might be, go ask somewhere else. You know, if somebody comes and says, I'm a blind programmer and I want to know how to do such and such and such and such, we can say, well, the blind programmers list is the best place to answer that question because they're people like you. If you come up with something good, we'll add it to the answer we keep here. We can't. Well, birthday card the other day from my twin brother. Forget about the past, you can't change it. Forget about the future, you can't predict it. Forget about the present, I didn't get you one. Well, never mind all that. We can't predict the future. And we just sort of make the best of what there is. And that's what a plant does when it grows. It makes the best of what there is. So we can't see much beyond the next 2 or 3 months, I don't think. But if we set up an issue tracker and a list of questions and we work together on a few things and we talk again next month, then we'll be better placed. I think Kelly's just had to go. So I just really want to have less responsibility. So I'm going to sit here and hold my breath until somebody does something.
Well, I have to say, Jonathan, that I'm not Git competent, but I would be interested in beginning to participate in this thing. And I count on having to do a lot of learning in order to about the Git technology in order to do that. So I don't want to disqualify myself, but that's the context for me.
You don't need to know anything about Git to use GitHub in order to create an issue and answer questions and that sort of stuff.
Right. I'm looking forward to getting my feet wet.
I think there's enough of us to answer questions when they come in. I think our worry should not be that we can't answer the questions that come in. I think our worry should be that we don't get questions coming in. 6 months' time, it might be a different problem.
Well, you know, Jonathan, I just want to encourage you here. When you open a door, people will show up.
I hope so.
I have to run, need to take a bio break before my next meeting, but thanks so much for all this work and the energy behind it.
Good to meet you, Brian.
Nice to see you, Brian.
Thanks. I'm also going to sign out. Jonathan, thanks again for all this organizational effort that pulls this the community together. And it's nice to see a lot of the people again. I haven't been around for a couple of weeks. Too busy.
Thank you very much for your contributions, Tanny.
Yes, thank you, Tanny. And thank you, Philip, for your Elvis Presley quote.
Just channel your inner Elvis and you'll be okay.
Actually, I think I created something on Git at one point in time because I had been working on some software and I wanted to share it, but it kind of I began spinning my wheels as far as that part of things went. I'm still looking for ways to share the code that I develop because you know, I'm not trying to make money off of it, but I think it might be useful to other people to, you know, to play with.
Yeah.
So I was looking for
things. Have you looked at things like SourceForge and so on?
Yeah, I think SourceForge is where I put it. They use some sort of tool like Git to maintain version control. Anyway, I clearly have a lot to learn.